Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking at how AI is beginning to see the world kind of like we do.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff.
It really is. And so we're going to be looking at this research paper.
Okay.
It's called Multimodal Autoregressive Pre-Training of Large Vision Encoders.
Hmm.
But don't worry, we're going to break it down and make sure it all makes sense.
Yeah, no jargon today, right?
Right. No jargon. So basically, it's all about these AI models that can not only see images, but understand the text that goes with them.
Yeah, that's the multimodal part.
Multimodal, that's the word. So this paper is all about a family of models called AIMV2.
Right. And I think the best way to think about it is AIMV2, it can actually make connections between the images and the text.
So it's not just seeing a picture of a dog, it's like understanding the word dog, too.
Exactly. It's putting those two things together.
That's really cool. Okay, so how does AIMV2 actually learn? The paper mentions autoregressive generation.
Right. Yeah, it sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple.
Uh,
Think of it like you're trying to describe a picture over the phone,
okay.
pixel by pixel.
Wow.
You would start in one corner and you'd kind of predict what comes next based on what you've already seen.
Yeah.
And AIMV2 does something kind of similar, but with both pixels and words.
So it's like AIMV2 is learning to tell a story with both images and words.
You got it. It's constantly predicting and comparing and refining its understanding of the world.
That's amazing. Now, the paper also talks about the architecture of AIMV2, mentioning a vision encoder and a multimodal decoder.
Right, so think of the vision encoder, like the part of AIV2 that breaks down the image
Okay.
into its basic parts, takes the pixels and converts them into something the AI can work with.
Like translating the image into a language the AI understands.
Exactly. And then you've got the multimodal decoder,
Right.
and that takes those visual representations along with the text, and it tries to reconstruct the original image and text.
Okay. But why would it need to reconstruct something it already has?
That's where the learning happens. By trying to rebuild the input, the model has to understand the structure, the meaning, the relationships in the data.
So it's like taking something apart and putting it back together to really get how it works.
That's a great way to think about it. And all of that leads to some pretty incredible abilities that AIMV2 has.
So the vision encoder breaks down the image and text, and the decoder puts it back together, and through this process, AIMV2 learns to see and understand the world.
Exactly.
Wow. I can't wait to hear more about what AIMV2 can actually do with all this knowledge.
Me too. There's a lot to unpack.
Okay, we'll dive into that in the next part. Okay, so we've talked about how AIMV2 learns, but like what can it actually do?
Yeah, like the paper shows, it's really good at a bunch of tasks.
Right.
Like from, image recognition to answering tough questions about pictures.
Yeah, what really stood out to you?
Well, one thing that I thought was super interesting is how good it is at object grounding.
Object grounding.
So, like, it's not just about knowing that there's a cat in a picture. It can actually understand where the cat is
Oh, wow.
in relation to the other things in the image.
So, like, it's not just there's a cat. It's like the cat is on top of the bookcase next to the lamp.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, like, really important for interacting with the world, right?
Right. Because if a robot wanted to, like, pet the cat, it needs to know where the cat is.
Exactly. And, it's not just about that spatial awareness.
Okay.
It also has a really deep level of understanding.
Interesting.
Like, they tested AIMV2 on text VQA.
Text VQA.
Which means it has to recognize objects, but it also has to read and understand any text that's in the image too.
Oh, wow. So, like, if there was a sign in the image that said open or closed, it could actually understand that.
Yeah. Or like if it was a picture of a store with the opening hours on the door,
Yeah.
it could figure out if the store was open right then.
That's wild. That's really cool.
It really is. Like, it can take all that information,
Right.
the visual and the text,
Right.
and put it together to answer questions.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. And so another thing the paper mentions is prefix attention.
Prefix attention. I saw that.
So, like, think about how we look at a picture.
Okay.
We don't look at every single part of the image equally, right?
Right. We kind of focus on the most important parts.
Exactly. And prefix attention basically lets AIMV2 do something similar.
Oh. So it's like if you're looking at a picture of a birthday party, your eyes might go to the cake first.
Right. You're not staring at the wallpaper in the background.
Yeah.
And so this ability to focus on the important parts of the image is like super helpful for tasks like image captioning.
Oh, that makes sense.
Like helps it quickly understand what's going on and describe it in words.
Cool. So we've talked about what AIMV2 can do,
Right.
but the paper also talks about how it was trained.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought was interesting was the relationship between Model size, data size, and performance.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you kind of unpack that for us?
Yeah, so basically they found that just making the model bigger doesn't automatically make it better.
Hmm.
Like if you train a huge model on a small data set,
Mm-hmm.
it can actually do worse than a smaller model.
Oh, really? So it's not just about having a big brain, it's about having enough information to feed that brain.
Exactly. Like imagine you have this giant toolbox,
Okay.
but you only know how to use like 2 of the tools.
Right. It's not going to be that useful.
Yeah, and so this kind of shows how important it is to choose the right training data for your AI model.
Like, it's not just about the amount of data, but the quality and variety, too.
Right, and I think that's a big part of why AIMV2 is so successful.
The researchers were really careful about the data they used.
Exactly. So we talked earlier about the multimodal decoder
Yeah.
and how it's like super important for how AIMV2 learns.
Right.
Can you talk a little more about how that decoder actually works?
Yeah.
So remember, it's like taking a puzzle that's been taken apart
Okay.
and trying to put it back together,
Huh.
but you only have like the shapes of the pieces to go by.
Right. And through that process of trying to put it back together,
Yeah,
AIMV2 learns the connections between the images and the text.
exactly. It's going back and forth between that kind of abstract world of numbers
Right.
and the real world of images and language.
Wow.
And so that's how it learns to understand what it sees and reads.
That's incredible. So we've talked a lot about the technical stuff,
Yeah.
but I think it's also important to think about what this all means. Like, what are the bigger implications of this research?
You're right.
Like, what does it mean for the future of AI vision, and how could it affect our lives?
Yeah, those are the really big questions, and I think they're the ones we should focus on in the last part of this deep dive.
That sounds good. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Okay, so we've talked about how AIV2 learns and what it can do, but I'm really curious about the data. Like, what are they actually feeding this thing?
Yeah, the data is like the fuel, right?
Yeah.
It's what makes the whole thing go.
Exactly. And the paper mentions using all these different data sets,
Yeah.
including some really interesting ones like COYO and HQITP.
Those are some big ones.
Yeah. What can you tell us about them?
So they're basically huge collections of image-text pairs,
Okay.
like billions of examples.
Wow, billions.
Yeah, and that's really important for training a model like AIMV2
Makes sense.
because it needs to see a lot of different stuff to learn.
Right. So it's not just seeing like perfect pictures with perfect captions. It's seeing like real world messy data
Yeah, exactly. Like the kind of pictures we take.
with our phones and stuff.
Yeah, with our phones, blurry vacation photos with like weird captions.
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of stuff AIMV2 is learning from.
That's really cool. And so the paper also talks about using synthetic captions.
Oh, yeah.
Like fake captions.
Right.
Why would they do that?
Well, it's kind of like giving AIMV2 extra practice.
Okay.
So they train a separate model to generate captions,
Okay.
and then they use that to make captions for images that don't already have them.
No, so it's like making up new examples for AIMV2 to learn from.
Exactly. And it helps it learn different ways of describing things.
Like different writing styles and stuff.
Yeah, and different vocabulary.
So it's not just memorizing specific captions. It's like actually learning how to describe things in general.
Right. And that makes it more adaptable.
Oh, that's interesting. So we've talked about the data
Yeah.
and the training process.
Right.
But I'm curious about the practical stuff.
Okay.
Like, how is this actually going to be used in the real world?
Right.
The paper mentions training at native resolution.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So basically it means AIMV2 is learning from images in their original size.
Okay.
Like they're not resizing them or cropping them or anything.
So it's seeing the images exactly how they were taken.
Exactly. And that's different from how a lot of AI models are trained.
How so?
Usually they resize all the images to be the same size.
Oh, okay.
But with AIMV2, they're keeping the original resolution.
Why is that important?
Well, it makes it more adaptable.
Okay.
Like it can handle images of all different shapes and sizes.
That makes sense.
And it also means it's learning more detail.
Right, because it's not losing any information by resizing the images.
Exactly. And so this is like super useful for things like medical imaging.
Oh, yeah. Where the details are really important.
Exactly. Or like satellite imagery.
That's cool. So AIMV2, it can learn from both images and text.
Right.
It can understand where objects are in an image,
Uh-huh.
and it can handle images of all different sizes.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It really is. It's like a huge leap forward in AI vision.
Yeah, like we're really starting to see AI that can understand the world kind of like we do.
Yeah. And possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
Right. Like imagine AI that can diagnose diseases or drive cars.
Or like analyze huge amounts of data that would take humans forever.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It's an exciting time to be working on this stuff.
It really is. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into the world of AIMV2.
Yeah, of course. It's been fun.
I think we've all learned a lot about how AI is learning to see the world.
Definitely. And I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah, there's so much more to come.
For sure.
All right, well, that's it for this episode's deep dive into AIMV2.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.